Oh man, I hate it when it does that. Hey everybody, I am CheeseSlice, Jayme CheeseSlice, the engineer and producer of Uncontrolled Opposition. Welcome to the show today. We're going to have a good one. We're going to be talking about deep state, which is always a fun topic here on Uncontrolled Opposition. If this is your first time ever watching this show, though, live, I just want to let you know we are a radio show first and foremost. So we record for WBAI and the Progressive Radio Network, and we're going to do about 55 minutes of a recording, but we'll still stay on live afterwards, and you get to watch us here live and see all of it uncut, because later we have to take the recording and then format it for radio. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Gloria and Jayme, our hosts for today. Hello, you guys.
Hey,
How you
Jayme.
doing?
Hey, Jayme.
Let's put Gloria in the first spot so she'll be ready to go. And I'll go ahead and bring on our guests.
Jayme, I sent you a couple of pictures.
Okay.
That
Email?
if you could pull them up for the monologue, there's two.
Okay, I'll get them ready while you're starting.
Yeah, I sent them late. I'm sorry. It was a busy morning.
I haven't seen those yet. Okay, I see them.
Check your email. There's two.
Okay,
There's
I'll get them while you get started. So let's go ahead and bring on our guests. We have Alexis and Chuck. Welcome.
Hey, Alexis.
Welcome. All right. Gloria's going to do a monologue for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then she'll kick it off to one of you, and then we'll be off to the races on the show. So, Gloria, go ahead.
If you guys could mute your microphones while I do the monologue, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm going to mute them. Somebody is getting some terrible feedback.
If you guys mute your microphones while I do the monologue, that'd be great.
I'm going to mute them. Somebody is. Hold on, let's see if we can figure
Okay,
that out.
we can't begin the show until
It's Chuck.
Chuck, I think you need to put on a headset perhaps, because we're getting the speaking from your speaker hitting us back.
Yeah, that wasn't hitting us before we started the show. That's weird.
Okay, hitting us back. Yeah, we're getting an echo.
Before we started the show, that's weird.
So Chuck, shut off your microphone for just a second. Echo.
Okay, if I knew what I was doing, I would do it.
So Chuck, settle.
Wait, I'm confused. Okay, so nobody's talking right now, so that means we had to get
waiting a few seconds for Chuck to get situated, so that when we start the show, you don't have to do quite so much editing. I'm trying to help you, Jayme. There.
Yeah, no, but it wasn't doing this before we started, so that's. Really
I know
bizarre.
he must have hit a button. And Alexis, while we're here, could you center yourself, because we're also doing a vertical. Do you see the vertical? Yeah, there you go. Okay. Perfect.
All right, let's try Chuck again.
Chuck.
Still getting feedback? Just want to make sure his audio is good so we can hear him.
Yeah, Chuck, you can try. Let's try your audio again. He can't hear us, right?
I don't know.
He's not responding. He can't hear us. Chuck,
Chuck, can you hear us?
We can't hear us. Chuck, can you hear us? Sorry, audience. This is what goes on usually before we start the recording. Today, I was a little late, so it's all my fault always. So, Chuck, we can see what you're doing. Just keep it above the waist.
Yeah, we got to be. I don't think he can hear us.
He can't hear us. We can hear him. Chuck, put your headset in.
At least the feedback's gone.
Yeah, I think what happened is he had the speakers on, and then it was, just playing it back.
No, yeah, his mic was picking up the audio from the show.
Right.
I think we can hear Chuck, though.
Chuck, can you hear us? Put your headset on. Jayme, why don't we mute you and Chuck, and then you can maybe talk to him on his cell phone.
Okay, let me
Yeah,
do
we
that.
better get started because I
Yeah.
have to leave at 11:15.
Let's go ahead and get started. We'll just go with you, and I'll chat with him. Okay.
Okay, great. Oh, but you got to put up the things. Oh,
Put up what?
hey everyone. You're gonna have to pay to put up the
photos?
pictures. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I need you to
I
focus.
I can only do one thing at a time.
I know.
Okay.
So it'll be
All right.
what it is.
right.
Once we go to the show, we'll just keep them off until, I don't know.
Just get started.
Okay, I'm going. Hey everyone, welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria, Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jayme Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jayme, CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guests, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Today, we welcome two guests. One I've wanted to meet for a long time, Alexis Baden-Mayer, and our good friend Chuck Zlatkin. Both are critical thinkers and longtime activists with many accomplishments. The predator class tells us we have no truth, justice, and peace movements. We have them. They tell us we have no leaders. We have them. They tell us we have no organizational structures. We have it. The issue we face is shadow banning. It limits our broadcasting of truth out to the public. The issue we face is keeping our leaders out of prison and out of the assassins' gun sites. The issue we have is keeping our organizations free from infiltrators that reduce them to controlled opposition and time wasters that limit important messaging. Mae Brussell knew this, and she spent her life combating lies by sharing truth. Is weaponized cancer program like many Latin American and US leaders.
Gloria, you have to go back. I muted you by accident there.
Okay.
You have to go back. Start like two sentences prior.
I'll just take it from the top. How's Chuck doing while we're doing this? All right, I'm going from the top. Hey everyone, welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jayme Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jayme, CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guests, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Today, we welcome two guests. One I've wanted to meet for a long time, Alexis Baden-Mayer, and our good friend, Chuck Zlatkin. Both are critical thinkers and longtime activists with many accomplishments. The predator class tells us we have no truth, justice, and peace movements. We have them. They tell us we have no leaders. We have them. They tell us we have no organizational structure. We have it. The issue we face is shadow banning. It limits our broadcasting of truth out to the public. The issue we face is keeping our leaders out of prison and out of the assassins' gun sites. The issue we have is keeping our organizations free from infiltrators that reduce them to controlled opposition and time wasters that limit our messaging. Mae Brussell knew this, and she spent her life combating lies by sharing truth. Mae was taken from us in 1988, like many Latin American and US leaders. Mae was working on the Prodeso, I can't say this word now, Prodecio. Okay, taking this back. Mae Brussell knew this, and she spent her life combating lies by sharing truth. Mae was taken from us in 1988, well before her time, by the CIA's weaponized cancer program, like many Latin American and U.S. leaders. Mae was working on the Presidio daycare center case at the time.
Presidio.
Thank you. All right, let's try it one more time. Presidio. Mae was working on the Presidio daycare center case at the time. The center is located on a military base that was overseen by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, a Satanist and expert in psychological warfare that advised the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Aquino was connected to many bloody covert operations, ranging from the Phoenix program in Vietnam to Iran-Contra. The Presidio case involved ritualized abuse done to children. The children contracted sexually transmitted diseases and identified Aquino as a perpetrator. Unsurprisingly, he was never charged. Mae received death threats urging her to stop her investigations. We've known about weaponized cancer and heart disease since the Church Committee disclosed these maniacal instruments of death in 1975. We've discussed the CIA's murder technique many times. Sometimes false flag type shootings are done to scare the public and make them numb and blame a fake enemy like the Kennedy assassinations. Other times, car or plane crashes and drownings are used to write off assassinations as unfortunate accidents, just before someone is about to testify or publish inconvenient truths. Other times, fake suicide, cancer, or heart attacks are used because they can be blamed on the victim and will remove any possibility of martyrdom or public outrage. Mae spoke many inconvenient truths that our guests will discuss today. Speaking truth to power makes even kindly grandmothers dangerous to the ruling elite, or the predator class, as we like to call them, because the truth requires the listener to question information and use critical analysis. The predator class wants obedient workers, not critical analysts. We hope Mae rests in peace knowing that her work opened many minds and that she herself was inspirational to many generations of critical thinkers. Now let's hear what Chuck, Jayme, and Alexis want to share with us about Mae. Thank you. Alexis, why don't we start with you? Why don't you let us know what inspired you to focus on Mae and co-write this article with Jayme?
Well, primarily it's been my work investigating Monsanto and Bayer, which bought Monsanto in 2018. But I was surprised to learn when I started getting back into the history of these two companies that, Bayer goes back to the Holocaust and before. It was a Nazi company that created Auschwitz. And Auschwitz, for Bayer's purposes, was a place where they could conduct medical experiments on slaves, on people who were being held at the concentration camps. And they could also use the slave labor for their synthetic rubber factory. So Bayer, we all know, has Nazi roots, but Monsanto had its roots in the US military and was key to creating the atom bomb, which was then used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II. So, we know the story of Oppenheimer, but if that story had been told properly, we would have actually been focused on the chief chemist of Monsanto and his work on that project. I think it's more the corporations than the scientists that drove that project, for sure. So these two companies seem like they're polar opposites. Like, one is very American, one is very Nazi, very German. But because of their joint relationships with Rockefeller and Standard Oil, going back to, I guess, the 1920s and maybe earlier than that, these were closely aligned corporations. And in fact, we know them being merged in 2018, but they merged after World War II when they were both supplying chemicals that were used as Agent Orange and other chemical weapons during the Vietnam War. So it's these two companies. And when I realized, like, okay, so it wasn't just that Bayer was a Nazi company and later, 2018, it merged with Monsanto. No, if Monsanto had merged with Bayer after World War II, and if they had financial relationships and contracts and joint projects going back long before World War II, then what does that say about Monsanto and companies like Standard Oil? Are they not just as Nazi as the Nazi corporations that they worked with in Germany? I mean, I think your listeners probably understand that corporations like Standard Oil, the Rockefellers, would have been perfectly happy for Hitler to succeed just as much as the Americans. Like they were playing both sides and investing in both sides. And no matter how the war turned out, they would be fine. They would have their wealth, their power, their control. And so that was just a real eye opener. I realized, like, okay, so there's not that much difference between the Americans and the Nazis. And they've been working together. The corporations that have been controlling these governments have been working together, since their origins. And so someone wrote in a comment of one of my little articles about this, oh, you sound a lot like Mae Brussell. And I was like, Mae Brussell? And I was like, okay, that name sounds familiar, because when I read the book Chaos about the Manson murders, I dove into that a bit. And certainly Mae Brussell was one of the people who was on that. She knew that the Manson murders were a psyop, and she had done work on that. And so I'd listened to some of her articles, but I was like, oh, maybe I should look up what she's done on the Nazification of the United States after World War II, because that had become a big passion of mine, looking into how Bayer, their corporate leads were put on trial, but most of them went back to running the company after the Nuremberg trials. And of course, if Bayer could so easily partner with Monsanto and start getting government contracts during the Vietnam War, like, how separate were these institutions anyway? So, and of course, Operation Paperclip. So all of that stuff, I realized that Mae Brussell had been on top of that since the get-go. And that was what inspired this article.
Well, I think it's important for you and Jayme to discuss Operation Paperclip, just, a little bit about it.
How about you start us off, Jayme?
Okay. And Brussell, was really an amazing researcher. I think anybody who wants to understand the dark underbelly of American politics should consult her writings, and a lot of her radio programs have been put up online, so they're easily accessible and you can listen to them. And she had a lot of keen insights and understanding, of these kind of dark behind the scene maneuvering, which I think often people, who were living at the time didn't realize what was going on. Even activists or people on the left didn't always understand these secret machination behind the scene that were manipulating American political developments, like with the Manson killings. I think there was a concern, and she was at the forefront of understanding how the so-called deep state, or these, powerful corporations working in confluence with intelligence agencies, were working behind the scene to destroy the 60s era movements that fought for greater democracy and social justice and anti-war causes. And because I was researching the Symbionese Liberation Army, which was created by the CIA specifically for that purpose, to bring negative attention and publicity, and to equate left-wing, peace-oriented groups with criminal activity and associate them negatively in the public mind, because they created this violent cult-like group that kidnapped an heiress and committed criminal activities, and their rhetoric was over the top and designed explicitly to alienate the public. And she was writing about that right away, understood that was a CIA operation as well. The Manson, they kind of go together, and very few people were writing about that at that time and seeing that reality. And now we have more, detailed study that came out by these researchers who researched the topic, like Tom O'Neill researched the Manson killing for a long time, like decades.
Mhm.
And slowly he pieced together certain hidden facts that corroborated the story Brussell was telling years earlier. And there was another book on the Symbionese Liberation Army that came out. I forget the name. I did a review of this book. It's very good. The author's name escapes me off the top of my head, but it was a book published around 10 years ago. But it was also based on like 20 years research and uncovering these documents and interviews years later. Sometimes people are willing to spill the beans years later when they're not a threat of going to jail or something, or they're getting older and they realize their health is frail, so they want to speak out. So we learn the truth years later when people have kind of stopped paying attention. But she was pointing this out right away, and she was linking all these assassinations together. She was not there's a lot of books like on the Kennedy assassination or Martin Luther King showing there was an underlying conspiracy, but she was linking them together and able to show how a lot of the same people were involved, and looking at the big picture, how this was breeding fascism in the United States. And now everybody recognized the danger of fascism under Trump, that we moved certainly in a more authoritarian direction. Even people in the mainstream are saying this, but she was warning years earlier, and she was also connecting paperclips. She was warning about the Nazification of the American government, that some of these programs came from Nazi ideals, like militarization of outer space, the Agent Orange, these medical experiments and germ warfare projects, the MK Ultra, that came from paperclip and the recruitment of Nazi scientists and was modeled after Nazi programs. And she looked at the background of people like Richard Nixon, who had been involved in the Operation Paperclip and wanted to bring in some of these Nazis. And then he became the president, and that was obviously very alarming to her. So I think she was ahead of the curve on a lot of things and was a brilliant researcher. She read like 10 newspapers a day, and she was very, very rigorous researcher and uncovered a lot of very valuable information.
Yeah, it's I think it's really important what she did to connect the Kennedy assassination back to this era of the post-World War II era, where the corporations that had been invested in the German Nazi project, the Holocaust, how they were embraced and took positions of power, as I suppose they always had been in the United States. But Richard Nixon is just like, I didn't know that Richard Nixon was part of Operation Paperclip until working on this article with you, Jayme. So that was eye-opening that Mae Brussell found that out. And of course, Nixon was caught up with the people who are responsible for the Kennedy assassination, but he ended up being primarily a patsy in that situation through Watergate, where it was just designed to make him look like a bumbling idiot. And he was the one who was connected to the Watergate burglars who were clearly connected to the Kennedy assassination. But it was all designed. I mean, it's so clever. The Watergate break-in.
Yeah, well, and if I could jump in on the Watergate, that's where she was also well ahead of the curve. And even today, at the time, I think liberals were cheering Nixon's downfall.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for legitimate reasons, since Nixon was such an odious figure. However, they didn't see the fact that the CIA, there was really a neoconservative coup, because Nixon had moved toward détente with the Soviet and the Chinese, and he had gone against the CIA as far as internal bureaucratic struggle. And now there's new books that have come out on the CIA and Watergate, how these burglars like E. Howard Hunt, who was also a key figure in the Kennedy assassination, that it was a setup. It was designed so that they would be caught, and it was a clever way to undermine Nixon, so the neoconservatives could take over, the more hardline conservatives who didn't like Nixon's détente policy. And she was talking about that years earlier, and now we have these books, and I reviewed some of them for Covert Action magazine. And unfortunately, a lot of this history doesn't get into the standard history textbooks, and that's why a lot of young people are alienated from their history courses. They find it boring because these textbooks just convey the standard official history, and not the real history that Brussell was exposing in her time, and that now we have new books and new evidence. Like Nick Bryant recently wrote a book on the CIA and Watergate, again validating stuff she had been saying and nobody else was saying at her time. And and they labeled her a conspiracy theorist or a kook. But if you look back at what she was saying and what we know now from newer works that have come to light, she was a visionary and a very rigorous researcher. And that's also a lesson. They often label dissenters or people who have the truth are hurled with all kinds of epithets and marginalized. We need to stand up for these people.
Definitely. Yeah, the book that I read was Family of Secrets by Russell Baker. That was the one that explained to me how Nixon was actually the victim of the Watergate affair, and it was designed to make him complicit, because I think the CIA and mafia plotters of the Kennedy assassination, they made sure to make everyone complicit in some way. Nixon was working for PepsiCo at the time. He was one of their lead lawyers. And the PepsiCo Bottlers Convention was in Dallas the weekend before the assassination. So they basically put Nixon at the scene of the crime and made it so that he had to know what was happening. I am convinced that Nixon, and I guess that's borne out by the Nixon tapes where he talks to, I forget who he's talking to, but he says, well, I know about all this Bay of Pigs stuff. And he's referring to the cascade of events that led to the assassination of President Kennedy, and I guess the ostensible reasons for the Kennedy assassination. So I think that perhaps Nixon really would have let the cat out of the bag. I mean, Congress was investigating. It was a crazy time, and it's so interesting to see the way the CIA, did the Watergate affair, and they also put out all sorts of interesting things that would capture the public's imagination and divert them from what Congress was getting close to, which was discovering that the CIA was behind the Kennedy assassination. I guess maybe a lot of people in Washington knew that the CIA was behind the Kennedy assassination, but they needed, it needed to come out. People needed to investigate. And so congressional investigators were getting super close to this. And they came out with things like the CIA using LSD on I'm blanking on Jayme.
Frank Olson.
Well,
yeah, that was a cover story. Yeah, see, she was on to stuff like that. He was a whistleblower with the germ warfare in Korea, and that he was murdered, but they framed it that he committed suicide. And she understood since she studied it systematically. She knew the cover-up story that they would design, and she knew that these were murderers. And that they would kill people, like Olson, who threatened to blow the whistle on these secret Nazi-type program. In fact, I think Olson had told one of his colleagues one reason he threatened to become a whistleblower is he said, "This is too much like Nazi Germany to me. I'm out," because they were testing drugs on prisoners of war and doing like sadistic medical experiments, torturing animals at Fort Detrick to get germ warfare, which they used in Korea. And he said, "This is like the Nazis. I'm out." And
one comment I'd like to make on some of the things that were discussed, which I think set Mae apart from many people then and now, is that she was able to bridge this truther information with anti-imperialist information. And what we see and we discuss very often on the show is how these two camps are kept apart. You have like the truther movement, which tends to be in the Republican sphere, where they're talking about these state crimes. And then you have more of the Democratic, group focusing on what's going on in Latin America and Russia and things like that, where you're looking at this imperial policy. And what Mae did and what we do here is very similar, is we bring that together. We know that what is done overseas is also done domestically. And the same techniques that are used for color revolutions or to foment dissent and civil war are the same things that are done to us here in the United States to keep us divided and to keep any analysis really compartmentalized and in different silos. So what we need to do is, and I think she's a very good model for this, is to bring together this information and understand that what happens abroad happens at home, and what happens at home happens abroad.
That's true. Yeah, I think sometimes the anti-war groups are focused on the evil of U.S. foreign policy, like in Iran or Latin America, and they don't focus, as you point out, on how these techniques are used at home and these secret machinations. And they tend to dismiss that as conspiracy theorists. Yeah, you find people on the left are sometimes the worst in kind of ridiculing or dismissing analysts like Brussell, when she had in fact, studied those topics systematically and understood the dark machination that was going on much better than a lot of other people. So.
And many leaders who were assassinated, in addition to, we believe Mae Brussell was murdered through, a weaponized cancer program. A lot of other leaders that brought people together, like Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King, Fred Hampton, so many fantastic leaders were also bringing together the concept of we need to analyze our foreign policy in alignment with our domestic policy and see how they're interrelated. And we need to bring people together and not have all of these divisive policies. So, we see that people who are engaged in peace and unity are on the front lines, and truth are on the front lines for murder. So, they tell us, in my opening monologue, they tell us, oh, well, we don't have these things. Well, we do. And she's an example of, we had Mae. But, they take these people out. They take them away from us, But what we could say to them is that you take out one of us and 100 of us come forward. So, we're inspired by Mae. And I hope people are inspired by us. And, and it just keeps continuing and growing. Maybe we can get Chuck back.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we invited Chuck because Chuck didn't write the article, Jayme and Alexis did, but Chuck knew Mae. So Chuck, please tell us about Mae and how you met her and what she was like, and what are your thoughts?
Okay. Well, actually, I first heard Mae listening to Bob Fass's midnight show on WBAI, and he would have Mae call in from Carmel, and he'd have her on for like an hour and a half talking about whatever she was working on and whatever. And I was a big fan of hers. And then she was on once talking about the fact that there was going to be a assassination conference at New York University, but they would not invite her because she named names. They would have the researchers on as long as they spoke in generalities. Well, I was outraged by that. And at that time, I was running the Elgin Theater in New York City, a revival movie theater or whatever, but we had capabilities for having live shows. So I just, contacted Mae and said that we would love to put her on live in New York City. And with the help of civil rights activist Flo Kennedy, we were able to bring Mae to New York. We put her on I think it was a Saturday morning at 11 o'clock because we couldn't conflict with the schedule we already had there. And the admission was free. So it was announced on radio station WBAI. Bob Fass was there to introduce Mae, and she came on stage and did the Mae Brussell thing. I mean, she was phenomenal. And the audience was there for her, and we had to stop briefly because there was a bomb threat, and under the circumstances, we had other bomb threats at the theater, like when we were sold out for the Marx Brothers and people couldn't get in, we got a bomb threat. And I said, no, that's just people who are upset about not being able to get in. But with Mae there, so we stopped, got everybody into the street for a while, checked out everything was okay, and Mae continued. And I don't know if you know about this, but Mae said, I'm in New York City. We have to eat some soul food. We definitely have to go to a soul food restaurant. I guess there weren't too many in Carmel, but anyway, so we did that. We went and found this soul food restaurant, and Mae was just a phenomenal person. She was warm. She had a great sense of humor, in addition to liking soul food, and it was a great success. And we decided at that point we'd try to arrange. Now this is like 50 years ago, so I'm trying to remember as best I can. But we were going to bring her back again to do a presentation just on Howard Hughes, and that was very different for whatever reason. The people out in the world responded very differently to that because, see, in the 70s, when your phone was tapped, it wasn't very clear that that they could do it without you knowing. So I definitely felt my phone was tapped at that point once that, and then all kinds of people were showing up in advance of Mae. Guys in suits with attaché cases would come into the theater, and obviously her work on Howard Hughes definitely rankled people, and they definitely wanted to know what she was doing and what was going on. But she was phenomenal. I mean, I've been kicking myself for 50 years now, the fact that I didn't get someone to film or videotape her appearance, which was really would have been the thing to do. But I mean, there's some people who had, people didn't have cameras on their cell phones then. They didn't have cell phones. But anyway, it was a privilege to know Mae for all the work she did and getting and to know her and hang out with her. And
what years are these?
This is 75, 76, I would guess. I bet trying to find that out as best I could, but it was at that time, and then I spoke with Mae a number
so
of times.
How old were you and Mae in those days? 75, 76.
I would never say how old she was. So
well, I think she died at 66.
Yeah, 66. So so in 76, I was 30, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, 50 years ago. I'm 80 now. But yeah, it was a tremendous experience. And then the last time I spoke to Mae by phone, that's when she was just telling me that she was convinced that her cancer at that time, which was, rapidly spreading, that she had definitely felt that she had been given it. Either somehow they got through her food. There were times, it was strange. She saw things in a refrigerator that she hadn't put there or whatever, but she was totally convinced that she was given that cancer by them. So,
we've seen that in Latin America. Castro, several other political leaders came down with cancer after they had gone to, in Brazil and Venezuela, as well as Cuba, they had gone to a conference. And right after that, they all came down with this virulent cancer that just is, unstoppable.
Right. Yeah. Well, she believed that was the case with her, and it just, a great tragedy because we lost, so much of what would have come from her. Assuming that she would have lived, beyond 66 and whatever. But it was a great privilege to know her, and I was really happy that we moved forward and got her to make her presentations and experience, the people who had, come to see her. And, I knew Paul Krasner, and he, published her in The Realist. And, we could have done more, but at least I'm happy that we did that much at that point, because, it was great to know her, because with all, she was basically who she was, from her background and where, how she was raised and whatever. But she was just a warm person, a great sense of humor. And she repeated, treated everybody with great respect, because, she said to me, you never know where you're going to get your next information from. So you can't just block people off because, how they sing, they may be giving you something that you could use. So
I think either you wrote this or someone else did, that something had happened to her daughter. Does anyone want to speak about that?
Yeah, well, her daughter was killed in a strange automobile accident. I think she was like 14 or 15 at the time. And then the person who was, as best I can remember, who was driving the car or whatever, disappeared. Whatever was going to happen, with him, and that there was no attempt to locate him or whatever. So there's probably more to that about that whole aspect. But she was totally convinced that they were trying to get to her by getting to her daughter that way. That would make her back off. But eventually they did threaten her, because she stopped doing her show on KRLB, because of death threats.
Did someone want to speak about the daycare center, Alexis?
That's not something I know a lot about. Jeremy, do you know? You're talking about the
I don't know about that. Yeah, we didn't. That was not in any of her published writings or radio show. So we surveyed, writings that she did. A lot of them were in The Realist and the radio broadcast. A lot focused on political assassinations, Kennedy, the King. She also, recognized the John Lennon. We had a guest, David Whalen, is a journalist who done research over the last 5 or 6 years to uncover a major plot behind the killing of John Lennon as part of this effort to destroy the 60s movements and its icons. And that was something she had been noting right away, a lot of anomalies in the Lennon killing. And she was suspicious about the rock. A lot of these famous singers who died under suspicious circumstance and suicide. And she felt that there was, odd people around them, lacing them with drugs, and also getting them to push the drug culture, which kind of diverted the 60s, movements away from political protest into the, this kind of druggy lifestyle. And she felt that was an offshoot of the MK Ultra. And I think there's more evidence to, corroborate some of the things she was saying. So those are the facets that I was and Alexis were looking into, that I think are a lot of what she was saying, was very well grounded. So that's why it doesn't surprise me that she was facing all these threats, because she was onto stuff that very few people were bold enough to try and disclose publicly. And even people on the left who are focused on the evils of American foreign policy or empire didn't go into these realms that she was going into, and often shied away from it. But she was exposing some real corruption and dark forces that were manipulating American politics in a strong rightward direction. And I think, reading her today now, I think you can see how she was really forecasting this dangerous slide into fascism, and the two right-wing party, one, extreme right. And she was, critical of both parties and how, political elites were corrupted. Like, she had stuff on the Carter administration and Carter's ties with the Trilateral Commission. And she was very good with the political economy. Like, I remember the stuff on Carter, because I wrote an academic article on Carter his administration support for the revolution, these high-tech military weapon systems. And then I found out from her that a lot of the top people in the Carter administration pushing these high-tech systems, because that was a key after Vietnam. The U.S. government had to find a way to fight wars and not enlist the entire population. So that's when they really ramped up development of drones and computer satellites so they can fight wars without enlisting, restoring the draft. And I learned from her that a lot of the top Carter people were on the board of IBM or had worked for IBM
Right.
Corporation, like Harold Brown, who was the Secretary of Defense under Carter and a big champion of the high-tech move toward this high-tech military. And so, she would often expose the corporate interests in various policies beside these assassinations and CIA operations. So she's really a brilliant lady and brilliant researcher. But the daycare stuff, I don't know about that.
Yeah. I just add something. I would say she didn't suspect. She was convinced that these murders took place because she spoke to me about them and just went down. I mean, I was, I had no awareness of it, but she just felt that all these rock cultural people were definitely assassinated because of, as Jeremy said, the power that they had in bringing young people in and having them question everything that was going on. But it was, she couldn't prove it at that point, but she definitely was convinced that this was all part of the same pattern.
And now there's new evidence about the Kurt Cobain. I guess she died before Kurt Cobain, was killed in 1994. And we have an article coming out in Covert Action. There's been stuff like people who knew Cobain or even witnesses at the scene who discovered his body have come out and said he was murdered. It was not a suicide. And there's suspicion about Courtney Love and her background with intelligence, and that Cobain was becoming more political, and that was seemingly the motive behind the Lennon assassination, that he could help revitalize the social movements of the 60s and the 80s, and was promoting anti-war theme in his music. And Cobain may have been starting to do more of that, and then he's clearly murdered. So that would fit the pattern. You have these rock musicians, and there's the case of Phil Oakes, who may have had his vocal cords cut. And he was an icon of the 60s movement, and he's one of the greatest anti-war folk singers of all time. And somehow he was attacked and had his vocal cords cut, and that led him to suicide. And I know Mae spoke about that case, the tragic case of Phil Oakes.
Yeah.
One of the big questions I had when I started looking into Mae's work is if there was something that we could go back to that would link the current government, the Trump administration, back to the same group of people who had been running the country during the assassination of JFK, RFK, and then going back to what was clearly a shift in the US after World War II to a very Nazi-controlled regime, a corporate Nazi-controlled regime. And she definitely, she had plenty of material. Towards the end of the article, I have to say, Jeremy did most of the work on this article, but my little contribution was the part at the bottom about the Trump administration. And I guess it was kind of obvious once I knew that Roy Cohn had been the mentor and lawyer for Trump. I realized, okay, Trump has to be a deep state agent. But it's always hard to prove. But then there's an interesting not a coincidence. There's an interesting line of succession, or how do you say it? Like the people who are in the Trump administration really are, some of them actually are people who go back to the crimes of the CIA during the Nixon administration. So one of them is Stephen King. He was Trump's ambassador to the Czech Republic during Trump's first term. And then he's been the CEO of the Republican National Convention more recently. And he was the one who kidnapped Martha Mitchell, beat her, drugged her, and prevented her from talking to the press. Martha Mitchell was the wife of John Mitchell. He was the director of the committee for the reelection of the president, CREEP, which I think also has to be a CIA joke played on Nixon. And he was obviously involved in coordinating the break-in at the DNC headquarters of the Watergate office building. So Martha Mitchell knew what was up, and she was trying to talk to Helen Thomas, White House correspondent Helen Thomas. And King went right into her hotel room, ripped her phone out of the wall, and kidnapped her. And she didn't show up for several days. And when she did, she was kidnapped in California. She shows up in New York. And she was so clearly, like just a thuggish, just like, the CIA sometimes is very slick, sometimes has good stories to cover their butts, but sometimes they do things that are just, like assassinating the president. And, they do some things that are so audacious. And this was one of them. I think that's one of the most audacious things they ever did, is kidnapping Martha Mitchell and preventing her from speaking to the press about the Watergate break-in. And the guy who did it is in the Trump administration. Like, how much more of a connection do we need to know that, it's like one of the things that made me interested in this history was the recent events of the COVID psyop. And I was like, it's like COVID, obviously a bioweapon psyop. Obviously, that connects it to 9/11 anthrax. So that gets us back to the Bush administration. And of course, once you're talking about the Bushes, their family history goes all the way back to the business plot to assassinate FDR. But, just to know that there are people like Steve King that just connect so directly to the worst crimes and most audacious actions of the CIA. It just is clear to me. Although, I talk to other people, I'm like, well, you guys understand 9/11, right? And you understand the Kennedy assassination. Now, how come you think that Trump is kind of just like an anomaly? Like Trump just magically becomes president? I tried to refer people to the documentary that Michael Moore did. He did a documentary about Trump at the end of the Obama administration, Fahrenheit 11/9, where he kind of sets it up like Trump could never have been elected president if we lived in a free country. He was so clearly a CIA plot. And of course, Michael Moore also does a good job of showing Obama for who Obama was. And I admit, I get bamboozled by these, the latest character that the deep state throws on the stage. I've definitely got bamboozled by RFK Jr., but at least I stepped away from his campaign in the summer of 2023, before October 7th, when it was so clear that Kennedy had a real blind spot on Israel and Palestine. I considered it a blind spot, but it seems that, even the people that I fall for, like Obama and RFK Jr., anyone who makes a national stage in this country is either controlled or sold out in some way.
Yeah, you just can't get to those positions without it.
Yeah, and Mae understood that, and because in going through a lot of her writing and radio shows, she would comment, like in the '68 election, and I didn't know, she found the connection between Eugene McCarthy came on the scene as the peace candidate, but she found he had a connection to the CIA. And I remember reading like Noam Chomsky, who was a serious peace activist, had critiqued McCarthy, that he was kind of really lukewarm, and then when his campaign fizzled out, he didn't help. He was asking, why didn't he help us out in the peace movement after his election campaign if he was a real peace activist and not just out for himself. But then it was through Brussels I learned that he had a connection to the CIA. And, the CIA is very good at what I think a lot of people don't understand, and including, activists and progressives, and they're well-intentioned, but they don't understand how the CIA infiltrates left-wing groups and manipulates them as much as they manipulate everything else. And that even, these so-called peace candidates like the Obama are actually controlled, and they may only focus on peace in one particular country, but they're not going to critique the system as a whole, or they're going to advance the CIA agenda, or they're really just kind of phonies to make people give the illusion that there's a real peace candidate. So Mae was attuned to that, and she exposed people like Eugene McCarthy, these pseudo-progressives, as having CIA backgrounds. She did good analysis and investigation to the Carter administration. It's linked with the Trilateral Corporation, IBM. So she was, understood the full story.
Well, one of the things that I just wanted to bring up quick, because we're really running out of time, and I want to give everybody a chance to let our audience know where they can find you. We were having a meeting last night in Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement, which is kind of an educational group. And it was brought to our attention that there's this guy, his name is Graham Plantner, and he is running for office in Maine. And, people liked him because he was saying what we want to hear. And one of the big things that I'm concerned with is the concept of hopium. And I just want everyone to understand hopium. Hopium is where, you really want to believe in something. You want to believe in something good, because basically a lot of stuff is very negative. So, somebody comes along and they're wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, and they're telling you what you want to hear. You stand behind them and you go, okay, let's bring this guy on. Jeremy and I did a lot of work on another episode called Spooks and Skirts, where we really looked at this movement from the Democratic Party to put CIA assets and agents in elected offices. And we had focused on 2 females, but there's plenty of males. And this, I would say, would go in the male category. So, we played a little bit of his speech. And in the first 20 seconds, he says, well, I'm an oyster farmer. Okay. And everyone's like, cool, oyster farmer. Sounds good. Let's vote for this guy. He's wearing a flannel shirt. He's got jeans on and he's an oyster farmer. Yeah. And then all of a sudden he says, oh, I was in the military. And then I'm going, what else is he going to say? And then he just drops it in. And I went to Afghanistan for the State Department. And I'm like, bells and whistles are going off. And I'm like, somebody who's worked, first of all, nobody carries, hey, audience, nobody carries a card that says CIA. If you work for the CIA, you're either a journalist or you work for the State Department or some other, organization. You never say, oh, yeah, I work for the CIA. Here's my CIA ID. It doesn't happen. So, that was something. And people were kind of upset that, I was bringing to the attention that this may be another, what's the word for this? The horse where you have the stuff inside it,
the Trojan horse.
Yeah, this is another. Thank you. This is another Trojan horse for us. So but we ran out of time. So let me just turn this over to our guests so that they can let our audience know where to find them. Let's start with you. I'm having just a brain fart. Alexis.
Sure. I am writing on Substack very occasionally. My Substack is called Scamerican Century. And otherwise, I work for a nonprofit. I'm not representing this organization today, but I work for the Organic Consumers Association. I've recently been cut back to half-time there, perhaps because I've alienated some funders who were really supportive of Kennedy. And anyway, I'm research director at the Organic Consumers Association. And I do appreciate, I'm proud of the work that I do for that organization. So I want to promote Organic Consumers Association, but I can't talk about all the things that we've talked about today at OCA. So that's why I'm so grateful to Jayme and Gloria for having Uncontrolled Opposition, a truly free speech forum here for folks like me who are limited in my day job to certain topics.
Thank you. And Chuck, how about you?
Yeah, I can be reached, Chuck Zlatkin on X, chuckzlatkin@gmail.com. And I just like to suggest, if you want to get a sense of Mae's work, one best way to start, and you can find it on email, is a piece that she did in, I guess, 50 years ago. It was published in Realist. Why was Martha Mitchell kidnapped? I think is a great place to start if you want to get into what Mae was about. And I'm also doing some writing, putting together some of the stuff that I've been involved with over the last years. And but please contact me if you have any questions about my experience with Mae and who she was and what she was like.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, there is a book edited by Alex Constantine, I think is the author, that is a collection of Mae's writings, so you can order that online or get it through a library. That has a lot of her key articles. And then her radio programs have been put up online. If you type her name in Google, you should get that website, and you can just listen to a lot of the broadcasts. I would do work and have it on in the background, and then I would have my pen and paper handy, for this article, because there was some rich insights, and so I had to have a pen to write it down. And yeah, I learned so much because I've studied American history and the deep state for years, and teach this topic and research, read any book I can on it. But there was stuff I never was never in any other book, except I learned so much that was new from Mae Brussell. So
I got a note from Jayme that we've got a couple more minutes. Jayme, are we okay? So I don't know. We have like maybe one more minute.
Yeah, we have 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
Because remember we had to restart.
Okay, well, if anyone, maybe a final assessment of Mae Brussell and her value today, if you can sum it up in 30 seconds. Go ahead, Alexis.
Well, everyone should go back and listen to, so it's a pretty big cache of recordings, many, many hours. It'll keep you busy for a long time. Yeah. Listening to her program, and then do your research from there. Like we did for this article, it was really fun to check her facts, get all of the documentation in from that. Yeah, I really think it just can keep us all busy for a long time. And it still has so many nuggets of information that are useful to understanding what's going on today. Like she was watching Trump, and she was cataloging his connections to people like Roy Cohn, because she knew Roy Cohn was involved in the JFK assassination. And this information is very useful to us because these families don't go away. The individual actors don't go away, but they generally come from families that have been involved in deep state politics for a long time. And then these continue. So we should continue to hold on to this information, make sure we know it, because I think it will prove valuable into the future.
Yeah.
Well, while we were doing this, I sent a text to our experts here about Mae and the child abuse at the center. So I'm really hoping that you guys take a look at this and see what holds water and what doesn't, because I think it's very important. Jeremy and I talk a lot about what gets you killed, because we focus on that stuff, and it seems if you focus on things that are an active plan, you are killed. If you talk about things that are historic, you're pretty safe. But once something is actionable, once it can change consciousness, once it can derail a program or a plot, that's when you're in the crosshairs. And Michael Aquino was a very high level person in the psychological operations with ties to the Phoenix program and ties to Iran-Contra. So if he was in the crosshairs of her research and it was current, that would be a situation where that she would be at great risk. And what we're seeing right now is we've seen 11 scientists killed. And they're saying, oh, they were murdered. I mean, they were suicided. They were clearly murdered. I mean, so this stuff is not back in the 70s that someone's killed, or back in the 80s that someone's killed. People are being killed today for knowledge that they have about certain programs. And this is not ancient history, folks. This is now. So anyway, so I hope you guys do that research. Well, that wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Please find us on Substack, Twitter X, and Podbeam. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Okay, we're still on YouTube, but we're no longer in the radio program. Poor Jayme's got a lot of editing to do on this one. I'm very sorry,
Head off
Jayme.
to a rocky start, but
I'm sorry, Jayme.
Once it got started, it went really well. So I think it'll be fine from that point forward. I was worried about working with Chuck behind the scenes because I wasn't sure if he was going to be good when we brought him back on. But it was smooth once he became back on. I'm very, very happy. So,
thank you.
I'm going to have to run because I have another appointment in about 5 minutes. So
and Chuck and Alexis, thank you for coming on the show. It's really nice to meet you, Alexis. I hope to see more of you. And Chuck, I always love you, and and Bernadette. So hey, Bernadette. Shout out to Bernadette.
I'll be sending it from our Substack, so I'll send you guys a copy.
Well, thanks for doing this on Mae, because she was extraordinary, and she changed my life. I mean, everything that followed that I did and the way I saw the world was definitely influenced by knowing her. She was just an extraordinary person. So
I've never heard of her before this discussion. So it seems to me like her work was probably very influential on a lot of other people.
Okay, bye.
Time as well. All right, thank you, Jayme. Thanks everybody for showing up today. And thanks for everybody watching it from home. This has been Uncontrolled Opposition. We're going to cut out and enjoy our weekend. So we'll be back next week with another episode. See you then.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
great. Bye.